Have have we ever seen a party collapse like this? Certainly not in the modern era.
I think the closest we could come to watching a party collapse is immediately post Nixon, 1973, where the Republicans were basically lost and divided. But in our lifetimes, even in the worst blowouts in 1994 and 2010, the Democratic Party still existed once the Republicans beat them.
Well, I mean, because they also own the White House, right?
Yeah,
So,
but what I'm saying is it's like you can see there's a long dark tunnel ahead of them where there's no light coming at them. They're going to have nothing but craziness. They're going to have nothing but chaos. The point I'm sort of obsessing about, you and I've talked about this a lot. Kevin McCarthy and Jeff Miller, his consigliere, these guys could go into any boardroom in the country, sit on any golf course with private equity guys, sit on any yacht, any billionaire's home, and say, "Oh, don't worry, you're giving that money to the NRCC. That's for me. I'll make sure
right.
we keep enough good guys in the House. It won't be all the MAGA crazies. It won't be the lunatics. It won't be the madhouse effect." And now he's gone. So even Elise Stefanik, who is like sort of the possible replacement, she cannot go with the same credibility Kevin used to go into those offices and raise all this money. I think this is going to hurt their candidate recruitment. I think it's going to hurt their fundraising dramatically. And now the companies that are going to give to the NRCC, they're going to have to look.
It's going to be Gold, Preppers, My Pillow. It's going to be all the people that advertise on Fox News after dark, right?
Right.
But, I mean, look, remember that, and it's interesting you bring up the donor class, because I was talking to a donor a little bit earlier, right before we went on air, Rick, and they said, and this is a person who knows a lot of the people you're talking about,
right,
and said, these were guys who, Kevin asked for $100,000 from each of them to have lunch last year, and said, I'm the only one who can keep the crazy in charge. Right. And, I'm going to win you 40 seats. Well, he didn't keep the crazy in charge, and he didn't win by 40 seats. So he'd already failed twice. And now these same people are the ones who are beside themselves. They were really, Stuart, McCarthy's only real constituency, right, were these very wealthy guys. So, the guys like in Orange County, the real estate guys, in Dallas, the real estate guys,
right,
the hedge fund guys in LA and New York. Now, they're going to give money to Matt Gaetz. They're going to give money to any of these people. And now they have to, some of them, as this person was saying, are like, I don't want anything to do with Trump. I don't want to do with any of these people. And what I said is, then you need to tell them, if they want their party back, they all must lose, and lose terribly next year. If you want some semblance of rebuilding a GOP you like, George W. Bush or whatever daydream you have, then these people must be crushed next year.
Well, it's a tremendous opportunity for the Democrats on multiple fronts. The Democrats can now position themselves as a party of strength in foreign policy.
Yep.
Yeah. They can position themselves as the competent party. They can position themselves as the no drama party. That's a lot of that stuff was owned by Republicans for a long time. We might be boring, but we'll govern, we'll be competent, we'll stand up to the Soviet Union and dictators. All of that is for the taking now for the Democrats. And, I can't say that they're going to screw this up. They might actually be able to go out and put some candidates up there who are serious people, some veterans, some younger candidates, and begin to get that. And if they do that, it could really be just a seismic shift in our politics. We forget, how long was it the Democrats controlled Congress?
From 1933 to 1995, with a few gaps in between.
Right, it was 54 contiguous years.
Yeah, so until 1994. There's no reason that can't happen again.
No, absolutely not.
And it would probably be the best thing that could happen to the Republican Party, because it would then have to, by force of sheer terror and the need to survive, become to be a party that had some purpose other than serving its own members and being a vehicle for grievance. So what think about what is it that they've been doing? What is it that this conference that Kevin McCarthy, investigating Hunter Thompson.
Hunter Biden.
Biden.
Although an investigation of Hunter Thompson would be a good one.
It might as well.
Sometimes it feels like we're Hunter Thompson. Yeah.
Joe Biden. I mean, and look at the people they have out there. These are just singularly weird, unlikable people. Just people that you see they're like, you don't want to sit next to this person on a plane. You can just, the vibe comes out of it. Like they're going to, this is not going to be good,
Right.
Yeah. Jim Comer asks you over for dinner and then wants you to go in the basement to see his collection of skin suits.
No, it's like, the person who gets on to you next, to use your airplane analogies, right? It's like the person who gets on with their security turkey or something, right? Like not the person who's got the small dog, but something that has no business whatsoever being on an airplane.
And it's really, really important.
My emotional support alligator.
It's really, really important that they talk to you about this thing that only they understand.
Right. But guys, just my dad texted me just as we were, and one of our viewers said this too, that McCarthy has said he's not going to run. He's done. So now, Rick, you mentioned, Elise Stefanik, who was Stuart, you knew very well. We all remembered her, but you knew her well. And she went full.
She was a
MAGA.
client. She was actually both an employee and a client, which,
right.
God help us, might end up being the first line in my obituary. The person that
you're responsible for Jason Miller. God help me. It's not enough that Jason Miller was my intern. I have to be haunted by these awful people.
But so she's got MAGA cred because she has sort of the fervor of the of the converted. And she knows, I guess, theoretically how to make the levers work. You've got Patrick McHenry from North Carolina, who's been around a while, who was otherwise, quote unquote, normal. I mean, he was sort of a firebrand back in his day, but he's the pro tem, so I guess he sort of manages the ship while there's no captain. But who really wants this job? And who can get the job when you've got 8 nuts out there who aren't going to do anything? They say they're going to, throw, Matt Gaetz out of the Republican conference. Like, what does that do? Right? Like, that's not a thing. Right. And so now you just have a situation where, like, I was asking my dad about, what happens now without a speaker. It's different than at the beginning of the session when they're all just, members elect. These are now members, they're now members of the House. The stuff continues theoretically. But it just creates the chaos. And Rick, as you said, if you're gonna have a vote in the next day, I mean, who does this? And let me just say as an aside.
Well, now they're reporting Wednesday since I.
Okay. Well, tomorrow is Wednesday.
Yeah. Oh, next Wednesday.
Oh, next Wednesday. Okay, so a week.
That'll be a fun week.
Yeah. But look, I mean, now this is so, there's these reports like McHenry blames the Democrats, right, for Stuart or I mean, like, Rick, I want to go to you for, betraying their oath to the Constitution. And, right. And now, Matt Lewis over at the Daily Beast is saying the Democrats shouldn't do this. And it's always funny. Maybe it's because we did it to them so many times, guys, but it's always funny that when the Republicans act the worst, it's up to the Democrats to act the best, right? It's never the Democrats who are allowed to say, oh, no, we actually do understand how to utilize power once in a while, and this time we're going to do it. And they're like, how could you do this to us? I mean, we set our house on fire. How dare you not help us put it out?
The idea that if Nancy Pelosi was in trouble, Republicans would have bailed her out is risible. The idea that it's a political party, it's the opposite party's responsibility to save you when you're drowning because you've embraced insanity, conspiracy, criminality, all the bizarro world stuff that defines today's Republican Party and Donald Trump. But the idea that Democrats have to bail them out is peak both sidesism. It makes my spine crawl to think about anyone who could imagine that it was the Democrats' responsibility to save Kevin. If the Democratic Party was dangling by a thread, Kevin would be there with scissors. They have no responsibility to save him. And in fact, I would argue that in the tradition of heightening the contradictions, it is definitely important to cause as much pain in the Republican conference as possible. If you're going to purge these people who want to, remember now, it's not that they want to have a different model of governance. They want to burn down the country. They want to end American democracy and change the republic into an authoritarian statist populist rule. They want Hungary. They don't want America. So the idea that anybody would help them to do anything other than push harder to knock him over the cliff is ridiculous.
We wouldn't be here if a group of Republicans had done the right thing and joined with Democrats and elected some Democrat Speaker of the House. They could have cut that deal.
The deal was under discussion, Stuart, and they got a little pushback from the left of their party. They're like, well, we can't give these moderate Republicans committee chairs.
Well, but let's be clear,
I know.
right? Like, we could go back to, but if Mitch McConnell had convinced 16 other people, which he could have done to make sure that Trump could never come back, we'd never be there either. So like that's just part of it. Let's speak about, the Eye of Sauron here, which is Donald Trump, right? And so he did not save Kevin. My Kevin, no longer my Kevin. He'll soon pretend that he never knew Kevin McCarthy, thought he was a big loser, right? The whole thing he always does. He's in a New York courtroom this week at his own volition. He doesn't need to be there, right? He chose to go and sit behind this witness table, which gave us, this picture that will launch 1,000, ads next year. He goes out and he does like even weirder press conferences behind the bike rack at the courthouse than he did with like the COVID stuff 3 years ago. Then he commentates on, this woman who's a clerk of the court. There's a picture of her with Chuck Schumer, Stuart. And now he goes out and says, he's clearly sleeping with Chuck Schumer, or she's clearly, and the judge is like, shut up, don't talk anymore. Right.
Yeah.
Trump's gag order, Chief.
Trump's going to violate this gag order. Now, the idea that Trump is going to end up in jail, before this election is looking more and more likely, because some judge is just going to have enough and is going to lock his ass up. And that's think about it, heading into an election, this is the head of your party. This is a person you're going to have to run with. You're going to have to justify all of this stuff. And it just goes to this myth that there is a Republican Party worth saving. There's not. It's not here. Save it to what end? What reason does the Republican Party exist now? What is their theory of government? And at the core of this failure, besides a lack of character, is ultimately a policy failure. Because had Republicans come up with a policy that would appeal to more non-white voters, that would appeal to younger voters, actually all that stuff that we said we should do in the so-called autopsy after the Romney loss, had they gone about that with a serious intent and been successful, it would be a path forward. But they didn't even try. When Donald Trump came along, it was sort of like the sigh of relief, like, thank God we don't have to pretend that we care about anything, but, the same old
because,
white people.
that takes work and courage and leadership. And those are things, Rick, that they don't want to do.
And it takes some intellectual rigor and a desire to govern. There was a time we talked about, the party of big ideas.
But look, think about this, Stuart, though. I'm sorry to interrupt. The intellectual rigor, right, on the right, I guess as we would call it, is in the Claremont Institute out in California with the Heritage Foundation, with this Article 3 project with this guy, Mike Davis, who I used to know years ago, who was always a conservative attorney, but has now gone full fanatic racist, right? And saying, he said on Twitter, I think it was today, we should have mass incarceration for the racial underclass. He said that today, right? So now the intellectual rigor on the right is fascism.
But
it's not conservatism, it's fascism.
There is a reality here that I think we all have to accept, and that is that a lot of what when sort of the Republican Party was, let's say, at its peak in the Reagan era, a lot of the stuff that we proposed as being good government turned out to be bad government. And we should accept that. I mean, trickle-down economics turned out to be a farce. Remember all the ads that we made in 1994 election. after Clinton raised taxes, where we said this was going to be the end of the economy. We called it the Kevorkian economy.
Oh God, I remember that.
And remember this?
And it was the last time the government had a
ads.
surplus, I think, right?
Yeah. And so what was the debate when Clinton left office? What to do with the surplus?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that was a legitimate debate after the greatest period of economic expansion and concentrated
peace.
period in American history. So
Right.
we were wrong. So, I mean, part of being intellectually honest is to admit, okay, we proposed something. We said if this happens, bad consequences would happen. It didn't. We have to adjust. And I do think in the Bush world, for a brief little moment there, when compassionate conservatism was sort of trying to find some sort of policy footing,
Right.
there was an admission that this had failed. That was the whole essence of calling conservatism. You had to call it compassionate. I remember when Bush got all this grief from conservatives saying, so you mean that by calling compassionate conservatism, you're saying that conservatism as we know it isn't compassionate? And Bush's answer was yes, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
And, but it all ended when he became a wartime president. So there never was this period that we went through where there was an attempt to adjust policy to reality. And the root of that is...
But look, now the policy, Rick, now the policy is just grievance. Hatred, ugliness is... And, who can we harm in the process?
Right. The cruelty is the point, as Adam Serwer says.
Right.
This is a party that this new right movement that is developed around the Republican Party is driven by cruelty, driven by racial hostility and animus, and don't let anybody fool you that that's not a key undertone of all of this stuff. And it's driven now by these weird, perverse incentives. So look, today what you saw this vote on the floor. And in the old days, everybody would have gone back into the caucus room or the cloakroom. They would have huddled together and said, what are we going to do now?
Right.
Instead, what did you see? You saw Matt Gaetz race out to a gigantic press gaggle. If you want to know why he's doing this, it's that. It's that the incentives in the Republican Party now are to get coverage, to run your email campaigns, to get clicks, to get likes, to be invited on Fox every night. And all this chaos, this drug they're chasing of chaos, it is classic chasing the dragon. The hit Matt got today, there'll never be another one as good, but he'll be crazier and crazier and crazier to try to get another. They'll keep doing this because they don't believe in anything except power. They don't believe in anything except power.
But, Stuart, I want to turn to a more positive thing, but I want to use the negative to get there, which is weird, which is, as Rick and I were talking earlier this week, and we've said this before, how unhappy, angry, small, hateful you have to be to do this all day, every day. To Rick's point, it's the bottoming out of an addict, right? Someone who is so strung out on all of this stuff. They've got no place to go. They haven't hit bottom yet. We should be clear. They have not hit bottom yet, but they're headed that way. But let's talk about the flip side of this, which is, last week, Joe Biden is in Tempe, Arizona with Cindy McCain dedicating a new library at Arizona State, right? Dedicated to, the late Senator John McCain, whom I worked for. Right, talking about the defense of democracy and the importance of service, right? Then if you have not watched his 20-minute interview with John Harwood for ProPublica, I commend it to everyone. It's fabulous.
Unbelievably great.
And here he is laying out the stakes of the election next year in both of those things. On Saturday night, he saves the government from a shutdown because McCarthy had to run to Democrats to avoid it, right? And now he's sitting there going, we're going to be with Ukraine as long as it takes. We're going to figure this out. We're going to figure this out. And so you take the nobility of purpose, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it, Stuart, that maybe guys, look, we're partisans. We're very, very partisan in what we do. So that's where we live. But at the same time, I got to be honest with you. If I had to choose a side, and I have chosen a side, and we have chosen a side, I'm sure as hell glad we're on the side we're on.
Yeah, look, I wrote a book about this where I said that, all these things that we Some of us thought
I recommend the
values.
new Stuart Stevens book, The Conspiracy to End America, available where all fine books are sold.
And you get a set of knives if you order it before the show ends. The 800 number will come. These things that we thought were values that all of us believed in turned out to be marketing slogans.
Right.
And, I mean, it's a really good point you raised. I mean, if you were of an age when we were drawn to a party and why we were drawn to Republican Party, it was a lot about these values. One was personal responsibility, which was very appealing. Now in the Republican Party, personal responsibility is a sin. You're a sucker if you take personal responsibility.
Right. You're a moke if you have personal
you're a moke. We were drawn to this idea that America could represent the best intentions of free people, that we would never realize that, but that we could aspire to that. We could aspire to be a shining city on a hill. We could aspire to stand up to tyranny. And at that moment, he stands there, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And those were things you could believe in. And now what? The Republican Party is the pro-Putin party.
Yeah.
It's the party that doesn't believe in this expansive, optimistic view of America. You look out and there is this horrible, dark landscape that is America. We're under attack by, not the forces of evil nations, but by, non-whites trying to get into America. And that it's our immigrants now the fact that people want to come into America is not proof that America is still the greatest country in the world. It's a great danger.
And let me just say this on that note, Stuart,
why would you be drawn to that?
On that note, here's the reality of what's going on with immigration. The border stuff accepted is, Rick, they're about to loosen child labor laws in Florida because you don't have enough people to work.
Correct.
That's the answer. It won't be immigrants. It'll be children. That's the answer.
It's what Florida children dream of, spending their days barefoot out in the groves chopping sugarcane.
I mean,
the time to worry about America is when people stop trying to swim over rivers to get to America.
Right.
When people don't want to, march, drag their families, leave their families to get to America. When you start doing that, how many people are trying to get into the Soviet Union now? Not a lot. And there just seems to be this complete failure to understand what it means to be an American. That it's something different than just, place on the map with a flag. There's some greater purpose here. And they've abandoned that. In fact, they almost seem to express a hatred for it now. Yeah.
Because Rick, they have to hate the idea that Stuart's talking about, that America is a great place, that America does have a greater purpose, because it comes back to the whole idea of the lowest common denominator. Trump is that bad. They know Trump is that bad. Therefore, Biden must be that bad. Everybody must be that bad. America's bad because everybody else is that bad. And if we like Putin, then we're as bad as he is, because it's the only way you could possibly convince somebody to vote for these goddamn people. Because why the hell would you want anything to do with them? They're terrible.
Yeah, it's a weird darkness about everything they do. And look, you're going to see that. Look, but tonight, if you dare, Fox is going to roll out, I promise you, a dozen Republicans, and they're all going to say, this is the Democrats' fault, it's Joe Biden's fault because America has failed. They're always describing everything as bad, as broken, as deadly. They're always describing everything as every city is a burned out husk. It's nothing but radioactive waste and ruins after Antifa burnt them down. Every minute at the border, it's all fentanyl, all drug dealers, all human traffickers. Not one part of the narrative that they have in their brains about America is true. They believe in a dark, reductive, bitter world. And it's so un-American to see a guy like J.D. Vance say, we're going to slam the door shut. To see people say that, the border has to be sealed, immigration has to be undone, that the 14th Amendment of birthright citizenship has to be reversed. All these things represent a super pessimistic vision of America.
Well,
and one of the great
you
things
know,
about America
they
is
want
we're always the optimists.
Right. Well, you know, and Trump and DeSantis and so many of the, you know, like now extrajudicial killing, right, is like just that's something we should do. Whether
I'm
that's
just going to line
shoplifting
troops up and shoot people as they come over the border as an example to others.
Right. Exactly. Cool. Which is, you know,
cool story,
again, the height of un-American. Okay, guys, I have to run in a couple of minutes. So, Stu, 60 seconds. What else are we looking at?
As always, I'm focused on Ukraine. The fact that the Ukraine funding was cut out of this resolution to continue to fund the government, I think is not going to prove decisive, but it's sort of an early warning sign of what Republicans really want to do. And we should just never forget this very simple truth. The Russians helped elect Donald Trump. They helped elect an American president. And what did they get? Well, they got pretty much a party. Now, that's not bad. I mean, it's as if, you know, you don't just get the odd traitor in the British government, you get the British government. Yeah. So we should never forget that, and we should hold them accountable. And let's all pray for Ukraine. It is a hope of democracy and of Europe, and a little bit of something inside all of us will die if Ukraine loses this war.
All right, Rick, how about you?
I am watching the coming Glenn Youngkin boomlet. There's going to be a moment here very soon where all the Republican big dollar donors flood Glenn Youngkin. They're talking about raising $250 million for him in one fell swoop to win the Republican primary. Now, look, if they want to give me that $250 million and just make a big bonfire in the meadow in my backyard, it will have the same impact.
It'll keep somebody warm.
Yeah, for at least a few minutes. But the Youngkin boomlet is coming. Ron DeSantis' chief strategist, Jeff Rowe, is out telling major donors that he's going to take the Ron DeSantis Never Back Down super PAC and give it to Glenn Youngkin as a beautiful gift. He's calling it the turnkey presidential campaign. Look, if you want to run a campaign as well as just like Ron DeSantis did, have at it, bro. Enjoy. Have fun storming the castle. That's what I'm watching for is this Youngkin boomlet. They need to try to change the subject in the primary because everybody else is flailing and falling apart.
Well, and just as a quick note, if Roe were to actually pull that off, he would join Dave Carney as the only guy to lose 2 presidential campaigns in one cycle. So he could do that. I have heard today that speaking of Trump, that Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita, Trump's 2 top advisors, called for an end to Republican debates because they are feeling pressure for him to join, but they are scared to death. They are absolutely having kittens about the idea of him being on a stage, not just with Chris Christie and Mike Pence, as I heard last week, but with any of them, because they are now convinced that not only would Christie and Pence say something, but that now Haley has found her voice, her anti-Trump side, and is willing to take him on. So they just want to cut the whole thing out altogether, which, as I saw somebody say, I think actually it was a Republican say, this is not the sign of a strong campaign. Let's hope not. All right, gentlemen, thank you as always. Stuart Stevens, thanks for your writing. Rick, listen to the Enemies List podcast, read his Substack, read the Resolute Square. Guys, Lincoln Project podcast, you can read my Substack and here at Resolute Square. As always, we'll see you next week. Best to Joe and everybody else. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Have a great night.